Okay, now we wanted to take our linear combination, our arbitrary linear combination, and apply two conditions. Y of 0 equals 0, y prime of 1 equals 1. To do that, well, we simply write out y of 0 and set it equal to 0. If we plug in 0 for t, of course, e to the t is going to be e to the 0, which is 1. E to the negative 6t is also going to be e to the 0, which is 1. So we're going to get this. And that's just a1 plus a2, and that has to equal 0. Now, let's do y prime of t before we do y prime of 1, just to be sure, and that's very easy. Y prime of t is clearly then going to be a1 e to the t minus 6 a2 e to the negative 6t. Follows then that y prime of 1 is a1e, because e to the 1 is just e, minus 6 a2 e to the negative 6, because of course negative 6 times 1 is negative 6. And that should equal 1. Now, from the first equation then, a1 plus a2 has to be 0. And what we have, incidentally, we have two simultaneous equations and two unknowns. So I can put a little circle around this, and a little circle around this, and ordinarily we'd probably go ahead and write these equations out just one and then the other so we can focus on what to do. But these equations are simple enough that I kind of skip that step. So since a1 plus a2 equals 0, a2 has to equal negative a1. And then we can substitute for a2, we can substitute negative a1, and we get the expression then a1e, which is just the same, but then minus 6 a2, which is negative 6 times negative a1 times e to the negative 6, and that should equal 1. Then letting a1 be just a, we get a1, well, I'm sorry, when we solve this, we get a1 equals 1 over 1 plus 6 e to the negative 6. The algebra is very straightforward there. We just factor out our a1 and then divide by the other factor, divide both sides by the other factor. And certainly anybody at this stage understands that algebra. So our solution is this. If we just, instead of now using a1 equals this, we just call this a instead of a1, our solution would then be y1 equals a e to the t, again, yeah, okay, well, I don't want to go back all the way to that. Okay, y of t is just going to be a e to the t, because, of course, if we let a1 represent a1 just as a, then our a1 e to the t will be a e to the t. And if a1 is a, then our a2 is negative a1, and we'll have negative 6 over 1 plus 6 e to the negative 6 times e to the negative 6t. Should be clear how we get these. Okay. So there's our solution for the two given initial conditions. What we want to understand is we can have two conditions on the two constants, on y and y prime. Okay, we'd have a condition on y, we can have a condition on y prime. We could have two conditions on just y, like y of 0 equals 0, y of 0 equals 7. That would be a perfectly good condition. We could have two conditions on y prime. In any case, we can still get our solution.